The class was Form 1 Biology. The topic was the cell. And the teacher, trying to interest us, began making the case that a group of cells comes together to form a tissue. A tissue comes together to form an organ. Many organs work together to form an organ system. And the entire organ system architecture makes the being. In a sense, what the teacher introduced to me is the idea that by the time the individual is not feeling well, the problem may not even be an organ system. The problem began at a cell. When I went to university to continue with studies in biology, we even went deeper than just merely the cell level. We went into the intracellular and looked at how everything works. And I began realizing that what normally manifests itself as a liver problem, as a heart problem, is really nothing more but something in the inner workings of an individual's cells. As it goes with a cell, so does it go with a human being. As we think about this interconnectedness, the key word that runs all through from cell to human is relationships. Cells relate together to form a tissue, tissue relates to form organs, organs relate to form an organ system. And if the relationship right from the intracellular level is off, the relationship at the macro will be poor. So as it is with the cell, so is it with a human being and with society as a whole. While we experience the breakdown of key relationships, and I'm not just meaning the relationship between labor and the employers, or the relationship between fathers and sons, or mothers and daughters, I'm talking about the intimate relationships within families have gotten quite a beating. While we try to solve the situation at the family level or at the industrial court level, we probably need to go down a little bit deeper at the cellular level, at where these relationships form. Way before a marriage is forged, people date. How are we beginning this? How are we engaging in this? Before and in the beginning of this, are we building it on the right things? If we are going to build an organ system of healthy human beings, interrelating with each other in perfect love, heart beating with the heart, and we being able to form healthy homes that will form a healthy society, we probably need to take steps back and begin addressing the question of how do we even forge those romantic relationships for the next generation. For love is going to be probably one of the make or breaks for raising an authentic generation. L-O-V-E, the word is love, but normally it's in the air. Some hormones do flow, and one of the things that the love hormone does is it impairs judgment and reasoning. And looking at the level of heartache and the speed with which people are going into relationships, it seems maybe there's a lot of hormones doing laps than is necessary. But anyway, on a serious note, we're talking about raising an authentic generation. And what's a generation if they can't relate? What's a generation if they can't form meaningful, lasting, loving, deep, committed relationships? We've been considering the powerful story written by a doctor who lived 2,000 years ago. He was a Roman citizen. His name is Luke, or some of us just like calling him Dr. Luke. He writes an account of what Jesus said while he was trying to illustrate something, and which we have come to codify and call the story of the prodigal son. Prodigal to mean the son who left and later came. But as we've been unearthing, we realize the story actually has two sons who are prodigal. One left, one had a prodigal heart. Now, As we listen to the passage in Luke chapter 15 from verse 11, I want you to pick the various relationship dynamics that are at play within this. Let's listen to it.
Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate."
And welcome back. So, when you read this, you begin realizing the different relationships, some implied, some very direct. The relationship between the brothers, the relationship between the father and the sons, the relationship between the son who leaves home and the unnamed people in the land he went, the various relationships. But for this session, I would really like just to focus in on the whole idea of romantic relationships and how they are formed, because it's an important piece for helping us raise the next generation. We have depended on procreation to be able to raise populations, to create the next markets, to be the next preachers and firemen and teachers and people who will fill the nation. It is from procreation. And this procreation has generally happened within the context of family. And this family has been often procured as the end product of a stable dating relationship. And therefore, if the dating relationship is not healthy, is not proper, or worse still, it is absent, it puts in jeopardy the stability of the home, and by it, every other thing that spins from there. Or as we put it in another way, if the dating experiences are sick, it's very likely that we will have marriages that are equally unwell. And since this is the modus operandi, the way we operate in procuring such relationships for majority of the next generation, we need to become adept at how to handle them. When you read the passage that we have considered in the book of Luke 15, what you do observe immediately is the idea that relationship success is simply 3 things. I'll state them, then I'll expound them. Number 1, it is being the right person. Number 2 is getting the right person. And number 3 is doing it the right way. Being the right person, getting the right person, doing it the right way. Any mishap in the story where you see any of this missing, the whole thing goes off. The father seems to be a really nice guy, but the son seems to be wayward. So this is the case of the son is not the right person, the father is the right person, and things fall apart, at least for the initial half of the story. Then there are the undescribed people in a faraway land who seem to have only been interested in what the prodigal son could be able to give and walk away from the scene when there's nothing left for him to be able to give. So, case of two wrong people perhaps coming together, and it doesn't matter how they worked on it, it was going to fall asunder. Finally, the only relationship that is secured eventually is when the prodigal, now broken by life and humbled by reflection, is able to come back as a right person. He meets another right person, his father, and then together they do it the right way. Boy, don't they throw a big party to try and bring things together. But those three principles are important: being the right person, getting the right person, and then doing it the right way. Let's move away from the haze and let's get a bit deeper. Being the right person. One of the things that informs people being the right people is what we call purpose. Your purpose is like your compass in life, so that anything that takes you towards your purpose, you embrace. But anything that takes you away from your God-given purpose, you discard. In the absence of your purpose, you do not have a clear compass. You do not have an inclusion or an exclusion criteria. You probably will go off on a whim. It's very apparent when you read the prodigal son. It seems he has no purpose in life. Case in point, he gets his wealth. He has no idea what to do with it. He goes to a faraway country and wastes it on riotous living. Had he been an individual with a good sense and a clear sense of his purpose, he would have known to invest, he would have known to grow, he would have known to impact. And actually the whole story, he basically blows up his entire wealth. Why? Because there's no compass of purpose to be able to lead him. It is therefore curious that in the absence of a purpose like this, when he ventures out into a faraway country, the expected happens, that he'll fall on anything. You see, your purpose helps you to know what you stand on, because if you don't stand for anything, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything, as it is correctly said. And therefore, in the absence of purpose, when this young man goes out there, he has no objective way of knowing which friends to embrace and which friends to discard. It is imperative that if we're going to raise an authentic generation of real people with real skills for the real world, including relationship skills, then we need to give more thought and more time to the whole idea of guiding the young people to discover their purpose, not just as a means for them to be able to make more money, or not just a means for them to be more popular, but because it forms a very solid compass that will come in handy, especially as they navigate important decisions like dating. In a previous episode, we dealt with the question of the quarter-life crisis, where one of the three important decisions that are made at that stage is the decision of who will I spend the rest of my life, what role will relationships play, and how deep will they be in my life. In the absence of a compass, the next generation will be able to flee for anything. The mood of the moment determines the decisions that will be more current, and there'll be nothing stable to be able to help them. So you can clearly see the drama and the failure that arises when a young man, without a clear sense of purpose, ventures out and tries to form relationships. He ends up being one who wastes his own substance and comes up short of the mark. Being the right person is about knowing your purpose, which then serves as the compass to be able to guide you. Step 2 is getting the right person. Now, there's all debate about, is there one person for you? Are there 3 potential correct people for you? The answer not to answer that, but to guide us on some principle about what does it mean to be the right person. You see, once you have established your purpose, like the young man eventually finds out towards the end of the story, then when you're going out to the marketplace, looking for different relationships, professional or intimate, it becomes easier. What you're looking for is to answer the question, in view of what God has placed me on the face of the earth to do? Who is the best placed person for me to be able to unite my interests with? In view of where I am headed, who is the best person for me to be able to include in this journey? And because relationship is not just about taking, it's also about giving, you're asking the same question of yourself about the other person. You're asking, in view of what this other person's calling is, am I well equipped to be able to support them on that particular journey? You see, good people is not enough for them to be married. There needs to be something stronger than just goodness. It needs to be goodness and a unity of purpose. Or as the Bible puts it, it asks, can two walk together unless they agree? Agree is not just consent. Consent is one point of agreement, but agreeing is also aligning on purpose, aligning on the compass, aligning on core values, aligning on vision, aligning on those things that are integral towards building a serious, stable, lasting, enduring relationship. And so, you see, because of the lack of this dimension in this young man's life, since his purpose was off, he was unable to be able to know who to join to and who not to join to. He was unable to get the right people. The pig farmer just saw nothing more in him but somebody whom he would keep alongside the pigs. The friends with whom he wasted his substance doing riotous living with them saw him as nothing more but as a means towards helping them satisfy the gratifications of their flesh. It is only when he returned back home that he was able to get somebody who understood his worth, his purpose, his calling, and was able to reintegrate him back into sonhood, even at a time when he himself was more keen to be relegated to the level of being a servant. And so, just pausing before we explore point number 3, is a question that we need to ask ourselves, which is, how are we doing with our relationships? How are we doing especially with our dating? I would really like to challenge you to begin thinking, are you being the right person? If we cloned you, and we put you out there, we put your clone out there. So if you're a male, we made a female clone of you, exact copy, and put out there. If you met that female version of you, will you be comfortable with it? Or will you run away from it because you know all its demons and all its weaknesses and all its undesirabilities? Depending with your answer to that question, you need to then be able to settle within yourself and ask yourself, if you are that uncomfortable with yourself, why on earth do you think somebody else would be comfortable with you? Many dating relationships are not thriving because that first component has not been well done. It means the net result is individuals are therefore procuring relationships the same way individuals use makeup. We use makeup to make up for what we feel we should be, but we do not think we are. It is, at the end of the day, artificial. And human beings are not designed to be make up for other human beings. Human beings are designed to be more of partners and not things we apply or amass or surround ourselves with so that we can be able to feel better. When relationships are entered with the idea of make up because we don't feel we are the right person, it is often recipe for heartbreak, narcissism, or just the whole idea of using other people. So you need to settle within yourself the question, am I the kind of person I am looking for is looking for? If there was a clone of me out there, would I be glad to meet it, or will I run away from it as fast as I can? And then there's a question of getting the right person, which is settled by asking yourself, what's my purpose? What's the purpose of person X? And then how do I help? Am I called to and able to help this other person meet their calling? And are they called to and are they able to help me meet my calling in life? So being the right person, then 2 is being the right person, and then thirdly is doing it the right way. Let's examine the story of the prodigal son, this phase when he was an inauthentic person. You notice, number 1, his initial cohort of relationships were done as far away from home as he could. The Bible says, Dr. Luke indicates that he went to a faraway country in a generation where they could be able to record mileage and be able to tell you exactly how many miles or whatever distance. When it says a faraway country, the idea is very clear. It's so far away, it was impossible to calculate. But then think about it closely, what this young man misses by doing his relationship far away from the country. He, number one, loses the opportunity to make relationships openly. What do I mean by that? His father knows him. His brother knows him. The servants in the home he comes from know him. At least some have probably seen him grow and have seen him do his thing. So they're people with an understanding. And you see, the people, wherever he's meeting, I assume he also met some females. The people in the country there, they don't know him, and he also does not know them. So he's missing the benefit of dating or of forming these relationships in the open, so that individuals who care for him, individuals who have more experience than he does, individuals who would be able to know a thing or two about relationships, are not able to have their contribution into this person's relationship. So one mistake you already begin seeing that makes this young man fall into all manner of wrong relationships is that he does not date openly. Now, I know the English there is it means different things in different cultures. In some cultures, dating openly means lack of commitment to a single person and anybody dating. So that's what I mean. What I mean, dating yourself. Place where individuals who know you well, who know the other person are dating well, are able to bring in insights and wisdom. I'm not talking about meddling, but I'm saying giving counsel. I'm talking about giving you input because there is sides of them that you don't know. What dating openly, as I've explained, looks like and helps people with is it helps them get the input, especially if the individuals giving their input are people of experience and people who fear and know God. So mistake number one is why this man is not able to, why this man keeps on making a shipwreck of his relationships is that he fails to do it correctly in that he does not date openly. Then number two, the Bible says he wastes his substance on riotous living. So there's riotous living, there's virtuous living, there's thrifty living, there are varieties of ways an individual could live. But you notice when he was forming his relationships, he only did it through riotous living. The time he goes to live with a pig is with a pig, and the guy who put him together with the pigs is because of necessity, not because of intentionality. And so you notice the second thing in his pattern of forming relationships is that he does not form them variably. If this was a man and a woman, it would mean they only meet in very similar, constant settings all the time. So if it's church members, they probably only meet when singing, say, in the choir. There's nothing bad with meeting as choir members, but what it denies you is the opportunity to see this person in different settings. Maybe if this prodigal son had first held back and observed this cohort of friends in various circumstances where they were with people poorer than them, where they were with people richer than them, where they were with people at the same income level with them, where they were with people more powerful with them or less powerful or equally powerful, and just observe how they behave, maybe it would have spared this young man a lot of the unnecessary heartache that he had been able to get himself into. And similarly, a lot of the next generation is given into the Hollywood, almost fast food, microwave kind of dating where things just happen quickly. You barely know somebody once, they've moved in, and things are happening, and you've not had the chance to be able to date variably. What dating variably helps with is it reduces the chance that somebody is acting. If all I ever have to do is show up in one place at the same time and do a limited range of things, it's easier for me to put up a facade. And as they say, marriage is blind. Dating is blind, marriage is an eye-opener. You don't want to be in that scenario where you feel like you married someone else and the real person showed up when you got married home and they showed up from the closet. Often the reason for that is because people are in such a rush that they do not date variably. They don't go out on mission, they don't go visiting a child, they don't go visiting relatives, they don't go to a proper banquet. They don't do these things variably. And as a result, like the prodigal son, they find themselves either in the pigsty or with their substance completely wasted. Let me look up in our time together and just say this. Let me say one thing to the ladies and let me say one thing to the men. Ladies, you don't date a man's potential. You date a man's patterns. You don't date a man's potential. You date a man's pattern. You don't date a man's promise. You date a man's patterns. So a lot of men have potential. A lot of men will give you promises, but that's really not the thing that makes you commit. You need to be able to see their patterns. Granted, I have not said you date a man's money, okay? Because at times the money is not there. But if you look at his pattern of hard work, of honesty, of integrity, it tells you, given this pattern over time, he'll be able to generate more wealth. He'll be stable, he's reliable. But if all he's ever giving is promises, or all you ever see is potential that is not being worked upon even in the smallest of ways, that's a red flag. But you see, if you don't date variably, you're not able to see and realize patterns. If you don't date variably, all you see is just one bucket of things. Now to the gentlemen, when somebody shows you who they are, don't explain them, don't excuse them, believe them. When a woman shows you who they are, you've dated them variably, and you've seen who they are. You've seen maybe they're lazy or they're kind. You've seen maybe they're rude or maybe they're pleasant, whichever one. When somebody has showed you who they are, it's not your responsibility to explain them. It's not your responsibility to excuse them. It is your responsibility to believe them. So when I show you who I am, believe me. And then base your decision not on what you imagine they could be, but base your decision on what they really are. Had the prodigal son dated or interacted with the people variably, he would have clearly seen their character, and then he'd be at a more easier place to be able to make that decision. He forfeited that by not dating or interacting variably, as many in this generation now do. And then after dating openly and dating variably, the third thing you see with this prodigal son is that he fails to date or to interact realistically. Life is real. This boy comes from a home where there are workers, there's flocks to be taken care of, there are farms to be done, there's real everyday life. But when it comes to the business of procuring friends, he organizes his interactions in a way that is completely detached from the realities of everyday life. Everyday life does not include partying and clubbing and doing the things that waste your substance on riotous living. Everyday life is work. Everyday life is coming and having difficult conversations. Everyday life is real. And he, just like many in our times who are growing up inauthentically, especially in this domain of relating, are guilty of doing so by organizing their relationships, especially the romantic ones, and in the dating phase, around very unrealistic things. People want to eat out in a cafe all the time. It's both unhealthy and unrealistic. You cannot be able to sustain that in marriage. I'm certainly not endorsing the whole idea of people eloping or doing a come we stay, but I'm speaking about doing things that border on what real everyday life will look like. Real everyday life has got working together, it has got visiting other people, it has got hanging out with genuine friends, it has got working out together on tasks. If your dating relationships or the various relationships you're procuring are not built around real things of everyday life, you're probably becoming an unreal person, building unreal skills for an unreal world. And when finally marriage will be an eye-opener, you will realize that not only have you been dating a stranger, you've been doing it the wrong way. If we're going to build healthy, flourishing societies, it needs to begin at the intracellular level. That's the individual. And as the cells come together in what is dating, it needs to be done, it needs to be about being the right person, getting the right person, and doing it the right way. In the failure of that, we will continue this cycle where the next generation is either reluctant to build important relationships that require commitment, or will be in a situation where they will rush to enter into things, and no sooner do they enter into them than they realize that their usefulness is brought to a waste. This is an authentic chat, and let's keep the conversation going.